go ahead and get going. Madam Clerk, Mr. Clerk, are we prepared?
Yes, we are. We're ready to start.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the May 5th, the Cinco de Mayo meeting of the Reno City Council, our special budget meeting. At this time, we're going to open with a Pledge of Allegiance. And if we could get Mr. Jonathan Shipman, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Madam. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Certainly, Madam Vice Mayor. Councilmember Breckus.
I'm here today.
Naomi Dewar.
Here.
Oscar Delgado. Here. Bonnie Weber.
Here.
Neoma Jordan.
Here.
Devin Reese.
Here.
Mayor Sheevy.
Here.
You do have a quorum.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Madam Mayor, for kicking us off this morning, and thank you very much for doing what the appropriate thing is and staying home to keep us all from getting sick. I appreciate your prudence in that, and I think we all appreciate it. At this time, Mr. Clerk, can we please go to public comment?
Certainly. It's because I shaved. It's hard to tell.
I'm sorry.
Madam Vice Mayor, our first item today is public comment. It should be noted for those in the audience that comments are to be addressed to the mayor and council as a whole. Comments heard under this item will be limited to 3 minutes per person and may pertain to matters both on and off the council's agenda. Please note that the council may not take action upon any matter not agendized on today's agenda. When you are called on for public comment, please state your name for the record and begin speaking. The timer will begin when you say your name, and you will be afforded 3 minutes. If you are an attendee in the Zoom meeting and would like to make public comment, please raise your hand at this time. Lastly, while in this room, please be respectful. Warnings will be issued by the presiding officer if there is disruptive behavior, and you will be asked to leave chambers if the behavior continues. At this time, we have no one in chambers. We have no one registered on Zoom wishing to speak, and we've not received any written correspondence.
All right, thank you, Mr. Clerk. At this time, I'm looking for approval of the agenda. I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. At this time, we're going to move on to item B1, presentations. All right, take it away. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Madam Vice Mayor and council members. Happy Cinco de Mayo.
Happy National Day of Prayer.
Oh, wait, before we get started,
Yes.
we made a major error yesterday. We did not sing or say happy birthday to Councilwoman Dewar. So Councilwoman Dewar, we would like to.
OMG.
And I'm sorry you're not here in person, so we can sufficiently embarrass you in person, but I think we should sing happy birthday to Councilwoman Dewar. Was everybody think?
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, ready?
Yes.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Naomi. Happy birthday to you.
Madam Vice Mayor, thank you very much. I am deeply and sufficiently embarrassed. Thank you. And I appreciate all the good wishes. Thank you, everyone.
You bet. I hope your birthday was fantastic. Thank you. Okay, go ahead and proceed.
Thank you. Vicki Van Buren, Interim Finance Director for the record. We only have about 20 slides today, so this is going to be pretty fast. So I know it's been a long week, and so I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. We do have a lot of information here, but a lot of it council has seen before. And so my intention is to go through these 20 slides and then have any questions following that. So today we're just going to be focusing on the general fund. We talked about this in April. We focused on the general fund. It was the largest one, the biggest for us to put together, the heaviest lift. And so today we're just going to focus on that and circle back to it with the items that are being proposed to be added for next year. So this first slide on here, we wanted to just highlight the budget guiding principles and some of the things that we look at when we prepare the budget. One of the policies that we have with the guiding principles says that when conditions permit, we maintain a general fund reserve level between 8.3% and 25%. And one of the things that council has directed in the previous years is that we increase the reserve level by 1% every year when possible. And so our budgeted fund level for fiscal year '22 was 13%, and what we're proposing for '23 is 14%. Then also another policy that we have are after reserves are funded, reduce outstanding or contingent liabilities, including OPEB, risk, and workers' comp. And as we've talked about previously in these workshops, we have continued to increase these over the last 5 to 6 years. During the recession, these were grossly underfunded because the revenues weren't coming in, and these were areas that were hard hit. And so it's taken us almost a decade to get back to the point where we can actually start funding a motor vehicle program, where we can actually start looking forward and actually having a program and getting off of the pay-go basis. Risk and workers' comp and OPEB, and those are all much larger obligations, but as you can see, we're really starting to make some headway on particularly like OPEB. I mean, I know it's an unfunded liability of $150 million approximately, but we have $17 million that we've accumulated right now in there. That's the net unfunded is the $150. So we're really starting to make some progress on that, and we're still continuing to do the pay-go on our current obligations. So that's in addition to this. So it's a really great thing that we're able to do that, and we're continuing to do that and build that into the budget. So this is one of the new slides that we've started doing. The total revenues in the general fund are $269 million. C-tax is 38%, property tax 26%. And then we've broken it down by function to show you how the general fund is distributed expense-wise. So 58% of it goes to public safety, 14% to admin. Now your admin's going to be all your support like finance, city manager, IT, all of the support people that provide support. So Parks and Rec is 6%, and then Public Works is 4%. The Public Works that you see on here is facility maintenance, utilities, and then the security contracts that we have, and then 2% to community support. When you go into the proposed positions for fiscal year '23, we're proposing 52 new positions, and so we would be moving from up to 1,423 positions. What was approved with the '22 budget was 1,314. And so we've had some changes during the year, and you'll see these changes in here also include changes between departments. So you'll see that Neighborhood Services is on here. It was adopted with the budget, but that's been spread out between some other departments, mostly city manager's office. So you see as some of the departments shift around, you'll see that shift in there as well. But overall, we have 56 positions that were added during the year. And as I've mentioned previously in these workshops, 30 of those were firefighters. And then we're recommending the 52 for next year. The proposed general fund positions total $3.7 million. And that's approximately 29 positions, and broken down by council priority. So again, we go back to council priorities when we're building the budget. How do these meet council's priorities to ensure that we're building the budget in a way that you would want? And so public safety has 14 new positions that are being proposed. For fiscal sustainability, we have 6. For the infrastructure, we have a little over 2. And for arts, parks, and historical resources, there are 3 positions. And in there, I just want to call out, we have within there, the tree maintenance worker, we have 2 of those in that particular one. And then in economic, community, and development, we have a little over 3 positions. And those are mostly in code enforcement and code compliance. So this gives you the general fund summary as far as where we estimate we're going to end the year. We do an estimate for that, and then we can do projections based on where we think we're going to go for next year. So for C-tax, we have a 6% increase for C-tax based on our proposed budget, and that is over the estimated amount. And then for property tax, we have a 5% increase. When you look at the general fund, how is it distributed? Again, 38% is from C-tax, 26% from property tax, and 11% from franchise fees. And this is a good pie representation to give you an idea of how big the pieces are versus just looking at the numbers. When you look at the general fund history, there's some important things on here that I just want to draw out because it's going to be important in the following slides as we go along. One of the things is in fiscal year 21, if you look at that, the change year over year for that one is 10%. And if you look at the previous years, we went from not even 1%, we had 10% in 18, and then around 5% for 2 years. And so in fiscal year 21, which is kind of strange, it was that time when we didn't know how the revenues were going to come in. We were following the pandemic. No one really knew what the effect of all this was going to be. And yet we had an increase in total revenues of 10%. And I do want to make a clarification too that the CARES funding, I did remove that from this particular slide so that you could see a true trend, so it didn't skew this slide. And then if you look at the current year, we're looking at 8% increase, and then for next year, we're proposing about 5%, which is your typical amount that you would see. And the general fund, this is the property tax history over the last few years. And like I mentioned before, we're projecting a 5% growth for next year. And in the current year, we're looking at about an 8.9% change year over year, and that's mostly due to new development as we see that come in. We're currently tracking about 3.6% above budget, and if you look across on that line, percent over under budget, we typically go anywhere from 3 to 4% over budget is how we've trended over the years. And for our projections, we do use the projections that come from the county, and from the county sends projections to the state updates those projections, and then we do use those state projections for this as they have been trending very consistently. Now for C-tax history, this is the one that I was mentioning as we get, so if you look at fiscal year 21 again, we have a 19% year over year percent change, which I don't think anyone's really predicted. It was just something that's happened, and not really sure why. We thought it would taper off a little faster than it did. So in the current year, we're 12% year over year change. So we had a 19% increase, and now we're seeing a 12% increase year over year over that where we think we're estimated to be. And then for next year, we're showing 6% growth on our current year estimate. And we think that's consistent with our other local partners because we do feel that it is going to start to level off at some point. We're not going to see consistently 19 and 12% increases. It has been pretty extraordinary up to this point. One thing I do want to point out on the slide, if you look at the actual for fiscal year 21, that's 85 million. And if you look at our current fiscal year 22 budget, it's 84 million. Because, and I wanted to do a little explanation on that. We build our budget right now. So we're in the phase of building our budget for next year right now. We've only received C-tax through February up to this point. We have 4 more months of C-tax to come in. So all the projections that you're seeing are based on what we know today. So at the point we built the 22 budget, we still didn't have those 4 months of C-tax. The last 4 months of C-tax for last year were 20% over budget. So that really skewed our projections for the current year. The first 8 months of last year averaged 4% over budget. So when we built the budget, we were looking at that average of 4% over those first 8 months, built the budget, and then the next 4 months came in at 20% over. So that's why you're going to see that. So as we get to some later slides, when we talk about new revenue is really over a 2-year period, not a 1-year period, because we didn't capture all that revenue that we're actually getting this year. So it's really going to be new revenue for us next year.
Can I just ask a question on this one? Can you just, so what did you use for this year? So not
This
4,
year
not
is
20.
6%
Six, thank you.
over where we're estimating we're going to be. And our
Okay.
estimate this year, because right now we're trending 12% above last year.
Bless you.
And so 12, and we're currently actually trending 12%. Over under budget, we're trending 13.9% over budget right now. And so I've trended that out over the whole year. So if
Mr.
the
Cole,
next,
can you just stop the clock? I'm not asking any questions. I just wanted clarification on this one.
Sure.
And she said 6%. Okay.
She said 6%, we're done.
but just as a clarification, we build our estimate of where we're going to come in. So our budget is 84. I'm estimating we're going to come in at 96 this year. And then I built next year's budget 6% higher.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So this is a summary of the expenses on this slide. And there's just a few things I want to call out on here. This transfer to the city debt service, this is going to come up on a couple of slides later as well. In that number in 22, in our current year, you have the Krebs bonds at about $1 million, and then you have the fire apparatus bonds, about $700,000. Then in the current year proposed, that $5.3 million, that includes the addition of the $60 million bond and the debt service for that, which is 3.5, we're estimating at $3.5 million for next year. So that's the total of the 5.3 for next year. And then you still see on here the transfer to the fire apparatus program. That's the 2.7 that we continue to fund in addition to paying the debt service. This slide gives you the example of the salary and benefits. Salary and benefits have typically run between 79 and 80% of the total expenditures. They're sitting at 78% of total expenditures in this budget. We did increase service and supplies for the first time in probably 10 years, at least a decade. We've increased their base budget a little bit so that they can afford some of the things that they need to do with the costs of everything going up in the economy. We felt that that was important to do that. This is a history of the general fund expenditures. This does include the CARES funds because those overlapped years and it was a little harder for me to pull those out to get a good trend. But you'll see that most of those CARES funds were spent between 21 and 22 because you'll see those total year expenditures with the carry forwards on those years get a little skewed, and that's because of the CARES funds. Now, this is the slide that I was mentioning before. This is the general fund new revenue source, that delta change. And so what I was trying to describe here, what this is a comparison between our current year, fiscal year 22 budget, and our next year, what we're proposing, the fiscal year 23 budget. So as we adopted the budget this year, what's the difference between that and what we're proposing for next year? That's $36.5 million. The bulk of that you can see is intergovernmental revenue, which is mostly C-tax. And really that's going to be a 2-year growth because as I alluded to in the other slide, we didn't anticipate getting so much and we didn't budget that money in this current year budget. And so what this delta is going to be is between really a 2-year period for that. And so for fiscal year 21-22, the delta for C-tax is $10.5 million. And for 22 and 23, it's 5.7. So in total over the 2 years, the new revenue for C-tax is a little over $16 million of this. Now, property tax has a little bit of that effect too, but not as much when you see that's over budget for a particular year. Again, that's new revenue for the next year. But C-tax is the one that's really driving this because we didn't anticipate. I don't think anyone really anticipated that it would come in the way that it did. Now, when you look at the expenditures, where does that new revenue go? These are the areas that have increased in the budget from the adopted budget to the new budget. And so one of the questions about, so in total, $9 million is attributable to the new positions this year. Those are the positions mid-year and the positions that have been proposed in this budget. The mid-year positions total a little over $5 million, and 4.1 of that is for the firefighters. And then the proposed positions for 23 total 3.7 million in the increase, and of that 1.7 are police positions. So in total, including the mid-year and the proposed positions, we have an $8.8 million increase in the salary and benefits, and so that's part of this change that in the budget. One of the other things, the ending fund balance, the 2.8 million, that is the 1% required to increase the budget from the 13% last year to the 14% this year. In the debt service, now debt service gets a little trickier, and when we purchased the Public Safety Center location in fiscal year 20. And since that time, we've been talking about how we're going to get there, how we're going to get things done. And so one of the things is, from the get-go, we pretty much knew that we were going to probably need to bond at some point to finish that project. And in fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22, we put aside $1.8 million in anticipation of being able to fund debt service in the future. What we did with that money was put it to the capital program for the Public Safety Center. But again, we took ongoing funds to make sure we would have that ongoing. The other item going on in this debt service is last year, we did budget $2 million for the event center bonds for that debt service because C-Tax was coming in lower, and we thought it might stay lower when we had that dip. And when we budgeted $2 million to do that. And that's not necessary. Since the economy's come back, it's come back a lot faster than people thought. Those two items were in the current year budget. So between those two items, that's $3.8 million that we had in the current year budget already. So when we take on the new debt for next year with the $60 million bonds, it's the same dollars. It's pretty much a wash because we had set aside 1.8, but we don't need the 2 that we already had this year. So that's why you see in debt service, it doesn't impact us going forward, and we have the new revenue funds to cover that. Fund balance history, when we go into this, again, fiscal year 22, this is showing where we project to be again on this one. So we're projecting we're going to be at 14%, and we're going to maintain that for next year. We had actually budgeted to be at 13% at the end of fiscal year 22, so we're ending a little better. And then I have a few more. So this is the 10-year projection. If council remembers, probably about 3 to 4 years ago, we started bringing this to council, showing the 10-year projection and where we wanted to be to get to a balanced budget. And at that time, which was several years ago, we actually had projected by 23 we could get to a balanced budget, which we actually have. And that's due in part to council doing strategically putting positions into the budget by strategically taking one-time money and putting it toward one-time things. It's just that tightening of the belt that got us here, that really made it possible for us to balance the budget, not stop funding all of the unfunded liabilities, increase funding to those, and continue to build a budget that is sustainable in the long term. And so this fiscal sustainability is really shown on this chart. There are a lot of assumptions built in here, obviously, but looking at this, we can maintain a 14 to 15% fund balance throughout the next 10 years with just general assumptions in revenues and expenses that we would typically do over that time. We built in all of the financing and other items that we have outstanding right now. The fire apparatus program That bond ends in fiscal year '29, so you'll see the debt service kind of decline there. But this is a good picture to show you that we are projecting that we can afford to do the things that we're doing and that we're in a good position moving forward to be reactive if there are things that we need to react to forward. And that's part of that whole resilience of the budget that we've been working toward. And this is just a final quick summary. So obviously we built this budget based on council's priorities, and we've really tried to focus on that, and we've really tried to show how these positions are really going to support council's priority. The 52 full-time positions equals $6.4 million. They're split between general fund, building fund, and then other funds. This slide here shows you that in total, the total recommended proposed enhancements include the 52 positions, plus the additional items that are just one-time, like the shared vehicle and some training and such. So in total, that's $8.1 million of increases. How do those how does that additional funding support council's priorities by function? This shows all those items in here, how their function works, public works, general government, and how that's on the left-hand side, how that actually supports council's priorities of infrastructure and fiscal sustainability and public safety. So the proposed positions in total, we have 12 positions in economic and community development, 14 in infrastructure, 4 in arts, 14 in public safety, 6 in fiscal sustainability, and 2 in the HAND program, which is in the economic support, and HAND is a grant funded. The additional proposed funding items that are not related to positions are listed on this slide. You have the vehicle on-call funding for streets departments for emergency call-out, plow truck. You have arts and culture, public safety. There's some items there for peer support and training. And then, again, fiscal sustainability, which was some software and employee development. And with that, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. We will start our first round of 3 minutes. Councilwoman Breckus.
Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Van Buren. Question number 1 is, how often are you, as an interim finance director, talking to people from other local government agencies, and what other state support they give us for budgeting?
I talk to other local governments probably at least once a month.
Okay. Do you have a formal group that meets and talks?
We do not, but I do talk to them quite often via email and on the phone.
Okay. What are you doing? And
Absolutely,
how's it going?
of
Okay.
course.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, I was sitting in the finance department. I was an assigned planner over there in 2008, and the signs just came. I mean, it's almost, if you're looking here, they're just over here, they're over there. And I'm sure Andy Green, who was the finance director at that time, was seeing the signs very geared, and Jill Olson was there because they were in auction rate securities, and that market collapsed, then everything else collapsed, and everything's going to be different. But I just we'll see. The tone is sounding very frightening to me out there right now, on macroeconomics and how that works, and maybe usually there's a lag time till things hit Reno, but I am still nervous. When is that bond instrument? When's the do or drop date for the council on that bond?
We're bringing back the first reading of the ordinance on the 11th, May 11th, and then the second reading on the 25th.
Okay.
And then the sale and the closing occur in July.
In July?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Well, I want to use the CARES Act funds for that and keep us safer. Let me ask you, that one pie chart on the, let me go over the 10-year projection on this first round. When I look at the 10-year projection, I appreciate it. I just looked at salaries and wages. So I see an 8% over to, from this to next. Then I see a 4 and a 3. what out year do we start to absorb those fire grant funded positions? Which budget year do you have that reflected into salaries and wages?
We're actually absorbing them in here because we budget to pay for the entire cost of those positions. What we've done is set aside $2 million extra dollars into capital that we're going to spend in capital for the next couple of years until that grant runs out, and then we would be able to afford those positions as we go forward.
Okay, so it's a little gimmicky, right? Is it gimmicky?
No, we can cover the positions.
Okay,
Yes.
but putting it in capital,
Yes, because
it's
because technically what we're doing is we're getting a little over $2 million in the grant, and that's what we're putting into capital. We're not technically putting the grant.
I understand.
back to the
Okay.
wages, we're covering
Okay, so
it.
you're kind of switching around that.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
And then I think my time is close going. But in capital, you're dropping, and maybe that explains it, from 22 to 24, you're dropping capital by about 700,000.
That would explain it, correct.
That's what's going on. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman Dewar, followed by Councilman Reese.
All right, thank you so much. This was great. My first question is this: I was going through all of this paper, but is there one page somewhere where I thought it might be in the all funds summary, that it shows the entire budget, all funds, so that we can see what's the bottom line number on everything
It's the first page in the presentation from day one.
from day one?
I believe,
Okay.
yes.
I don't think I comprehended that with all of this detail that we've just gone through. So I'll go back and look at that before my next question. But I did want to say, Councilmember Weber and I were just complimenting the team because you did something very special this year, Mr. Manager. You put the org chart, something that I'm very interested in. You put the positions, not names, but positions. And then you put the new positions where they go, circled red, so we could find them. I mean, this is a level of transparency that I'm extremely grateful for.
I have to tell you, I didn't do that.
Okay,
Vicky did that with the help of Lindsay and Mark.
okay, yay, team. Because that right there, given that over 80, what did you say, 85%, 87% of our money is in our staff. And so this is a roadmap to understanding where we're spending our money, because we can directly find
Yes.
positions circled in red that are new, that are fantastic. So we're both, I don't want to take away any of Councilwoman Weber's thunder, but this is something I know a bunch of us have been looking for, just to grasp and understand in a different kind of way. It's a different kind of map.
Well, thank you for that.
Okay, it's really helpful. Thank you. I'll leave it right there for right now.
Okay, Councilman Reese.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Jordan. A couple of things. I guess first is sort of where I come from, which is I'm a lawyer, so I don't pretend to be a market analyst, a finance director. I don't believe that that is my job, to read the tea leaves about what I see on the news. But of course, what we want are data points and facts and numbers, which is what you've done, is you've provided us with that. So I feel very comfortable with the roadmap that you've given, and I appreciate all the work that's gone into it. And it's not just this year or this budget cycle, but it's 5-6 years of budget cycles that your experience comes from. And so again, I'm not going to substitute my judgment for yours about where we are with the numbers, how they fall. I think that is a level of sort of obnoxious micromanagement that I'm not going to engage in. The second thing is that obviously with regard to the CARES dollars that we have that have come in, and I like and appreciate how you have separated out those CARES dollars, because on a couple of the slides, it made it much easier to understand the historical nature of our revenue sources and also the growth projections that are taken and backed out of those things. So I appreciate that. This council, 6 of us have decided that those CARES dollars are going to be spent on, really the things that need it most in this community. They're not going to be basically a backfill for the budget, in part because the original guidance that came out of Washington was that was what was not expected of the dollars. And I think some cities and municipalities in this country sort of skirted the line and some of them crossed it. We didn't do that. We played by the rules. We continue to play by the rules. And that one-time money really should be, strategic investments in this community that will last generations, certainly long after any of us are on this or off this body. I want to ask a specific question about the OPEB unfunded liabilities, in part because as I talk to our labor groups, I understand the concern that they are raising, which is as inflation has happened and we're all feeling it. I think I filled up my car last night with gas and it was $85. And I was just like, wow. And that's happening to every American, right? And so when their paycheck stays the same, but all the costs increase, then they're sort of, their concern is that they're working for less, right? So that's why we're in these negotiations. And I wonder, with regard to the OPEB liabilities, I mean, I view it, as an actuarial reality as opposed to a today reality. So wonder what you might say to me to help me understand our thoughts on our unfunded liabilities, because of course, not all those liabilities come due tomorrow. The unfunded liability occurs over the lifetime of, employees. And so I want to know, what is our goal? Is our goal to be at zero? And I think only Washoe County is the one that's the closest to having their liability fully funded. So what can you say about the OPEB liability from just your analytical standpoint?
Sure. Thank you for that question, Councilmember Reese. The OPEB liability, it is a large liability that's out there. Typically, you don't really want to be funded at 100% because, as you mentioned, it is an actuarial calculation based on when they think people will retire, ages, what they're going to need for services and such. And so that number does fluctuate. Industry standard is generally around 80%. You want to be funded around 80%. And at that point, you can use the interest and other earnings on it to pay for your current obligations and things out of there. So you're not continuously pay-go. Right now, the way we're doing it, we are doing pay-go and we're funding. So we're doing it twofold. We're trying to build up the OPEB itself, but we're actually doing pay-go on all the liability currently. So once we get to a point where we can actually pay it out of there, then we would free up money, again, to pay for other things.
And Madam Vice Mayor, if I may, I'm over time, but I just want to sort of conclude my thought. I suppose for me, as a long-term goal and strategy, I want to see the OPEB liability sort of pulled out, and maybe we could have an independent offline conversation about it, because I'm not sure where we are, and it matters to our labor groups, right? And certainly is an area of historical consternation in labor negotiations, because how you view the unfunded liability also sort of determines the course under which you pay for it. And I like that you're approaching it on two fronts, but I also wonder at what point in time do we acknowledge that this, liability is, an actuarial liability and fund it appropriately. So I would like to know ultimately, when do you anticipate us getting to 80%? I mean, you said it was, I think, $109,000.
It's our net liability right now is 147. And we have 17 million in there. So the net is, so our liability is the 147 plus
Well,
the
and
17.
again,
So
it sounds scary because the number
It
is
does.
large, but it also is not unlike a mortgage where you owe a lot on a house, but you're paying it off over a period of time. So I guess for me, I would like to see, it doesn't have to be today or in this conversation, but I would like to understand our trajectory and projections for that, similar to the ones that you gave today.
And it, on that too, it would depend on what council's priorities too are. I've heard other agencies, typical, you want to shoot for 80%, but other agencies, some of their policies say we want to be at 50%. So that's a topic for discussion that that policy decision can be made once we start to approach that, to figure that out. And we certainly have projections. And again, there are a lot of assumptions in there as well, assuming we can continue to contribute like we do. Our current policy right now is that we contribute 40% of the property tax increase. So whatever property tax increase last year, we contribute 40% of that in addition to what we were going to do this year. So it always increases that amount.
And is this an area where Miss Kidd might be asked to do an audit? I don't know. I'm
Why
asking.
don't we do this? We'll come back around. I know that almost doubling of the average time, so we'll give others some additional time as well, but we'll get around, and we'll come back around. I think I was up next. I did want to say to kind of Councilmember Reese's comments on the OPEB. I remember when we first came on, it was a total pay go. And we started to, because it was such a priority to a number of our groups, that we started, even though it was small, it started us down the road of coming up with a more sustained approach to predictability of the funding of that. And I feel like we've made progress, always open for discussions on additional opportunities on that. But I do know that this council took that first step into funding that ongoing. Can we go back to the slide on page 114, I think it was? Yeah. This slide for me kind of sums everything up, and I just want to say I know that there have been hours and hours and so many meetings with department heads and line representatives and council members to come up with appropriate and balanced approaches as it comes to employees. I'm glad we're at the point where we're talking about adding folks in all of our departments, because it has been desperately needed for years, and we've never been in a fiscal position to be able to do that. And I think our city has suffered because of it. Our parks have suffered because of it. Our facilities and road maintenance and some of the other things have suffered, not because we didn't want to do things quicker, faster, and better. It's because we simply didn't have the people in order to pull it off. And so this is really great. I think it does a nice balance of recognizing the absolute priority of public safety and adding a number of bodies to help those departments, but it also adds them in departments that haven't seen anybody in years. And because we are one big, ecosystem that relies on, and each department supports the other in some form or fashion. So this to me screams team. This slide says it all. And it says we are moving forward in a strategic and thorough manner, but we're recognizing that it's time. It's time to add people in departments to recognize our growth and serve our community and our constituents. I'm excited about all of this. Obviously, there'll probably be more questions getting into some of the specifics, but just kudos for the thorough and balanced nature of this approach to our management team. Councilwoman Weber and then Mayor Sheevy.
Thank you so much. Ms. Van Buren, I think your presentations have been fabulous. You've done a great job, you and your department, putting all this whole series together. And I'm really impressed that it is so positive, but just the presentations and again, having this information that we can keep and use. I mean, I know many of you do it online, I don't, but I love this. And having the organizational chart, I just want to say thank you to the staff, because
Thank you.
between all of you, this is the best that I've ever seen. And I've been through a few of them. And so this is really fabulous. Thank you so much for the hard work that you did to put this
And I
together.
do want to say a big thank you to Lindsay and Mark. They've done a fantastic job.
Thank you.
To Lindsay and Mark. All right, Mayor Sheevy, did you have questions? You're not up on my screen, but I didn't want to scoot by. Oh, here we are. There you are. You are on my screen now. Okay, Mayor Sheevy, did you have any questions or comments?
No, I think everyone is right. Vicki, you have done such a great job. This really is probably the easiest budget that I've seen since we've been doing this. Every year I feel like I cringe when we get into budget. It seems really unclear. It seems sort of scattered. And that's always been, I think, the biggest gripe is looking at it line by line, like what positions are going to get filled or what we're looking to fill. And I guess my question to you is, over that 10-year outlook, do you typically see that those follow chart? And kind of tell me how you feel about it, because you are the expert. I think Councilman reset it correctly. You know, you are the expert when we look at this. You've done this for years. You know what city budgets should look like. I guess pay-go always worries me because it offers a level of uncertainty. And I think we have to have that when it comes to planning and continuing to grow the city. So kind of just give me a little bit of your perspective, because there was sort of a word used like antics or something like that. I don't know. But I just want to make sure so that it is on record and that public hears this, because this takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of manpower to put something like this together. So just kind of sum it up for me.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for that question. Well, the 10-year projection, your first question as to whether it trends, I think is what you're really asking. Do we see that it trends the way that we anticipate it? I think that we've kind of proved that it is a valid measure at this point, because we did this as we started 3-4 years ago, and by using that same trending, we've came out at that time, and I went back and pulled it, and sure enough, all those years ago, we said if we do the things that we're presenting here and follow along council's guidelines, we can get to a balanced budget by 23. And sure enough, we've actually made it to that this year. So I'm just really proud of that. And so going forward for the projections, one of the things that we do is we do typically, we're very conservative with the revenue. So you probably only see, each year we try to make a trend that we're not going to have high years and all high years. So we do trend that we're going to kind of flatten off in some years and other years. So we do have those conservative. The revenues are always very conservative when you do a long-term trend like this. And then your expenditures, you want to make sure that you're not undercutting them. So even if you project them a little higher, that's where you want to be, because when those actually come in, you're going to trend about how you've put them in such a long range position. Can I say that the 9 and 10 year marks are probably right on? I'm not sure, but I do know within the next 3-4 years, those are pretty close, because we can trend them unless there's a big dip in the economy, or if there's something catastrophic that occurs that we couldn't anticipate or anyone else. Other than that, the trending is very valid.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll go to Councilwoman Breckus.
Thank you. To slide 123, I had a hard time tracking that. So, the revenues, what you're calling intergovernmental revenue, is essentially, for all extensive purposes, C-tax, correct?
Yes, it's the largest portion. There's some AB 104 revenue in there, and there's also the freight house pass-through revenue, which really kind of skews it a little bit, because that's just a pass-through. It's in the revenues and the expenses.
Okay. But then you said it was a 2-year revenue delta.
It really is for C-tax, because we didn't budget it in the current year.
So
our budget for the current year is actually less than we received last year. So we didn't actually budget for any of that new revenue in the current year.
But it came in and we dealt with it as augmentations.
Correct, yes.
Yeah. So it's really how we set it in May. How we set it in May without the augmentations is the year over year that you're expressing in that line item.
The year over year would be the current year budget adopted versus the current year, the adopted for next year that we're proposing.
That we're talking about.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's one thing for me, to understand that. It's best to understand what we're working with right now, which reflects the latest augmentation. So on the latest augmentation, what was the year over year that you're building this on?
I don't have that in front of me.
Okay. But we got 23 million more than we were thinking this year at last time.
Well, that's really, again, like I said, that's really over a 2-year period, because we didn't budget for any of the money because if you go back to the one slide, where are we at? C-tax history here.
Yeah.
Our budget, when you compare the budget for the current year to what we're proposing for next year, that's really comparing to last year's actuals. So
Oh, that
none
one
of that
does.
was
Okay.
captured because
Okay,
we
okay.
received so much in C-tax, we
Okay,
didn't really
okay,
budget correctly
okay.
for the current year, so we didn't capture that in the current year budget.
Okay, so the actuals is 4 million, year over year. Is the red, correct?
The red is the actual and the blue was the budget.
Okay, so we're building this on a $5 million actuals to estimate C-tax increase.
Correct.
Okay, and then of that 5 million then, and then everything else is the same. So a 5 million increase, I'm trying to look at this. Then the 23 million on that chart that I was referencing, if you drop that just down to 5 million, your delta is really minus 18, is really more of an 18 million delta. And so how does an $18 million delta parse out? With new positions on the year over year change, like how much of 18 million are new positions?
I'm not sure what you're getting at
Yeah,
there, so
maybe
I'm
I'll talk
sorry.
about this offline, because I did ask you for this, I think, and it's still a little unclear to me, but I'll have time before the 18th to understand how that is carved out. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilwoman.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to just make some comments for the benefit of my colleagues. We haven't all been here at all meetings, so I just wanted to bring up, I was thinking back to what did I say on Tuesday, what did I say on Wednesday, what am I thinking about today? And I just thought I'd try my best to summarize some of the points I made overall, so that when you're going to go work on the finalizing the budget. So what I asked is that in capital improvements, you can either start or continue working on the soccer fields at Pembroke, where we have reclaimed water. There's some challenges, but I really think it would help to offset the challenges that are going to be faced by the construction of Moana Pool, and it's time. And if Pembroke's not the place, Mill and McCarran might be the place. And I did put that into the flood project budget. They said they're evaluating that area this year. So it is something that we should be able to work on. We're getting a new parks planner. And so I said that the parks planner could help with that new soccer field system, wherever it is. And also, priority for me is the Virginia Range Trail System. I don't know what else to call it, but it's needed the parks planner to be working with our counterparts in Washoe County and the trail groups to get that established. I mentioned, of course, public safety. I was really pleased to see where we were with the 14 positions, and I really thought we were making some good progress there. I recommended that we move forward with the $12 per hour for the parks wages. In fact, I even said more if we could do more, but I at least think we should accelerate that, and I'm not sure if Jamie's here. I requested, and this is something I'm really going to ask Mr. Manager and you to think about. So we look at all these special funds, the capital fund, the room tax fund, and all of these funds. I would like us to look at the enterprise funds at the same time that we look at the budget, because I don't know why we will put that off. Why would we not do it now? And there's several things I would like to see funded out of the enterprise funds, and we have been talking about them for a very long time. And just to reiterate, that would be a tree inspector, which is irrelevant of any new tree ordinance. It's just to today. Right now, for decades, we've required trees to be installed, landscaped and be installed as part of our planning projects. We have required as-built, which haven't been submitted. So all I want us to do is follow our laws that we have in place today, even if we have no new laws, just to make sure we're doing our job. And I did recommend funding that out of the enterprise fund. I know that is soft money, but I think that it's very important as we go forward, if we have rules and regulations on the books, that we actually enforce the regulations that are on the books before we even think about new regulations. It's just about, an example would be if there are noise violations. So, in some areas in town, there have been noise violations, including in my ward, but we never give citations. We only give warnings. on speeding, we might give a warning, but we do give citations. And I'd like it to be more like that. Like, sure, we'll give you a chance to correct. That's what we want at the end of the day. But if it's repeat violations, I think they should be addressed. The other thing I asked for, and I guess I'm going to go a little over, the other thing I asked for was, and I have asked for this for a good solid 8 years, 7 anyway, and I just hope we can do it this year, is that we get a person on board or a contract to deal with historic resources. So we have rules and regulations on the books. We have a whole section of our priorities called arts, culture, and history. We do not have a single resource dedicated to this. We do not have a single person, contract or otherwise, that manages our Historic Resources Commission, that looks at historic resources, that is an advisor to our planners, and so on. And I really think this is a year that we could address it. And then finally, something I brought up yesterday, and I'm sure this isn't everything I've talked about for 3 days, but I recommended in concert with my colleagues that we have many septic systems around town. And we have an option to work with the county on a program that was adopted 10 years ago. And I'm getting the bill number for you, Mr. Manager. I looked it up on my phone, but I didn't get a chance to get on my computer. But it's there, it's a resource, and it's a way to get a loan. And we don't have to set up an SAD necessarily, but we could with this loan program. And Councilmember Weber reminded me that when she was at the county, I mean, this past, when I was at the flood project a decade ago, that they went out and they worked with the Hepner subdivision whose wells were failing and provided money through this system, through this loan mechanism. And so it's there. And I hate that it's there for a decade and we're not taking advantage of it to deal with a really emerging problem with homes that are 50, 60 years old. So I'll leave it there for now. Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor.
You bet. Thank you, Councilman Reese.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. A couple of things. One is to close out my earlier comment, and this is directed to the city manager. I just think at some point in time, we need to have some standalone agenda item that talks about OPEB and where it is, what our projections are. If it's a Miss Kid analyzing it kind of a thing, then we need to be on board with that. Second thing is I wanted to just sort of, Ms. Van Buren, one of my colleagues described our accounting methods as gimmicky. And I just want to make sure you understand, I don't believe that you are a gimmicky person. I don't believe that your accounting methodologies are anything other than the standard acceptable practice and following of Gatsby. I mean, if I were an accountant and I heard someone use, the word gimmicky to describe my work product, I wouldn't like it. So I want you to understand that's not how I view the effort that you've undertaken in your team. I view it as truly exceptional work product, and so I want to make sure that that is said. I want to go to slide 114, if that's possible, but only in as much as I want to talk for a moment about public safety. So one of the things that has not been mentioned is about our successful use of the Saver Grant process a year and a half ago now in our fire department. I also think that just for our own edification and sort of a history of it, last year we made some choices in the budget that prioritized some of the major capital projects over adding more people. And so we were able to, do the apparatus replacement now 2 years ago, and we were able to do the Safer Grant. And at that time, I think we told our police officers, hey, we're prioritizing the public safety center. You can't have everything you need every year. So what I want to be able to say is that I'm glad to see some investments into our core public safety resources, which are identified on the slide. And I think that's right. Ultimately, this accurately represents to me our priorities, and we've taken our priorities and then we've lined them up with how we've funded them. I suppose the question I would leave you with, and perhaps it's something that city manager might speak to, is in every budget comes a moment where we're picking and choosing, and some positions are left on the cutting room floor. So I suppose rather than me saying, and I think Councilmember Dewar has consistently advocated for both historical resources and trees, and those things are important to any city. But they didn't quite make it in here, although it looks like one of the tree
Apparently it's
maintenance
in
work.
BFAC. It's in the enterprise fund.
Okay, that makes a little more sense to me. But I guess if there were a couple of positions that were left on the cutting room floor, which ones almost made it but did not? Is that a fair way for me to sort of say it, Mr. Manager? And I'm not saying that I want to set up a hunger style games where we're, fighting to the death over but if there is one position that came ever so close, I like to monitor it year over year so that maybe next year that's when we will get it. Make sense?
That makes perfect sense. And I think as we debrief from this budget cycle, that's information that I'm happy to share with you and make sure we keep you apprised of it as we move forward.
Well, an example was, and I'll just share, I went to Mr. Hall and asked him if this budget met the needs for his staffing. And he, graciously, as he often does, says, yes, we make do, we work hard, we're lean and mean, and that's great, but I never want to cut off our nose to spite our face, right? So I want to make sure that if there are departments that we're not quite hearing from, but we get some sense that they could use some help, that we know about it. So that's really all I want to say, not that there would be some specific position that we're fighting about here at the council, but just so we know long-term that maybe next year we've got to make investments in a specific place.
Of course. So what I would say, just I think for anyone's edification, is if you go back to the previous 3 days of presentations, one of the slides in that deck, and I'll be happy to dig it out and make sure that you all have it, reflects what the total ask from every department looked like. And perhaps there are some more details there that we could flesh out for you that might paint a better picture. Generally speaking, when we talk about things that were close but didn't quite make it into this form, you're looking at things that are maintenance related, right? So whether that's with BTS or whether that's with parks, those are the positions sometimes that are really close, and then we look at those mid-year as the opportunities show up.
Okay, we're going to move into the final minute. Councilwoman Dorr.
Yeah, and so my concluding comment for this was that I support what you've done, all of you. The choices that you've made. That would be my final comment, is that I think you've presented us a very good budget. We're talking about what our role is. We're not here as a rubber stamp. We are here to carefully evaluate. That's why you've spent all this time going over all the pages with us to make sure that we understand. But this is one of the biggest things we do, is to make budget choices. I mean, this isn't something we just say, oh yeah, it looks fine. We're supposed to dive into the details, which you have given us the raw materials to do that this year. And it's extremely helpful, right down to, as we mentioned, the org chart. So the reason I brought, just for Councilmember Reese's edification, the reason I brought it up is I've been assured these things are in the enterprise fund. It's just that the enterprise fund is not included in our budget. And so, it's hard to get a complete picture, which is why I asked a little while ago about page 3, which was all funds, all budget. I wanted to get the big picture. And so, and then there's mid-year ads, as our manager said. So anyway, this has given us a lot to work with. I like the choices that have been made. I don't know that if we know about every choice or even things you're thinking about, should we have a little extra money? And also just a challenge for us, what do you want us to do at the next meeting? Do you know what you would
Our
like us
next
to do?
meeting would be May 18th on the
Yeah.
budget, and that would be the budget adoption, and that would also include the fee schedule as well.
The fee schedule. Okay. And we should just mention for our colleagues, what we did with the fee schedule is that it was a huge amount to comprehend. I recommended basically keeping it as is, not even doing a CPI other than the ones that Parks had recommended, but we all agreed it needed more work, just for our colleagues that weren't here.
Councilwoman Breckus.
Yeah, I'll yield to
Final
Mr.
one.
Delgado because I don't believe he's
Oh,
spoken
I
yet.
apologize. I
No,
didn't see him.
it's no problem. I was ahead, but I think I'll yield to him.
Thank you. Councilman Delgado.
Thank you. As I stated when we first began, as I had a chance to look through the budget just a little bit and met with the staff, of course, in terms of what our goals were, and just wanted to share the same with respect to what my colleagues have shared. This has been a great opportunity to dive into the budget. I was not present yesterday, but I had a brief conversation with the city manager with respect to the conversations that took place, and I appreciate my colleagues diving in as far as they should. Ultimately, we look at all of you. We look at the boots on the ground. There's a lot of trust. There's a lot of professionals that have taken the city from where we were during the pandemic, now post-pandemic. And I really, really believe that you guys have heard us loud and clear, as I stated when we first presented the budget this week, in terms of our strategy, where our growth needs to take place, where constituents need their support. And so just want to, again, applaud and really thank you guys for listening to us. This hasn't been a process that I've seen in the past, and very, very different than it was in 2012, as some of our colleagues have known. So really appreciate
Thank you
it.
so much.
One thing I will state is we've done such a great job, I want to say, as a council, for those of us that have been here since 2012, in terms of being fiscally conservative with respect to how much we've paid down, how much we've put aside, how much we've been thoughtful in terms of how we've grown, and it shows. And I see opportunities now for us to really dive into some of the infrastructural opportunities, to get into some of the communities, to see how that needs to move forward here in the next few years. So again, thank you for diving in as you did during the time frame that you were able to. So I really, really appreciate you and your professionalism, and thanks to all the team that worked along with you. Thank you, City Manager.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilwoman Breckus.
Yeah, and I do hope we're going to have a chance just to do another round in presentation of the supplemental materials. They're thick, but I would like to understand what you felt was valuable enough to give us in supplemental materials, so I can look at those and prepare for the 18th. And I also, if I'm given the opportunity to make a motion, going to make a motion to ensure that there's $100,000 for historic resources in the budget. And I will be in big trouble if I do not make that effort and proposal when I go back and do my liaison work to that body. So just FYI. But the last thing I do want to say is I rarely take exception with the positions that come out of the departments, because the need is so great. The need is so comprehensive and so great. But for me, that's why the work program on an annual basis is so paramount for this council to hone in on. And when things come out of, wherever that are not on a work program, like a refresh to the Civic Plaza, where I've been having numerous of conversations with the manager on design and thoughts and studies that were done, it kind of gets me, because our resources are so thin. Why that initiative and not another initiative? And that's why, when we did our strategic document the other day, I found it deficient in that we didn't have a work program. So Ms. Stewart just talked about focusing on the septic systems. I want to see, when we get into the infrastructure, climate change, and environmental sustainability, I want to see the top three issues, because that's a top three issue for me, not all of a sudden. And what came up was this ledger group that was doing the database. That might be a great idea, but it wasn't on the work program. So I will continue to say we need to go back into strategic planning workshop. If we are going to accept these as our top three, we need an 18-month, 15-month work program for each. That's doable, that everyone agrees upon. No surprises. Here's how it's going to go. So that's off budget, but budget is really how you implement your work program priorities. So good job to all the departments too. I think they get it to you. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I did have a question. Councilwoman Breckus, you mentioned this 100,000 for the historic initiative. I believe you said that there was a desire to do, was it an inventory of the historic properties in downtown?
Well,
Is that what it's called?
It's called a survey, and we've done one for California Avenue. We've done one for Pounding, and it's more or less a prescribed approach by the state, by historic preservation protocols that, it is rather intergovernmental, because we are a certified local government that flows through to the State Historic Preservation Office, that goes up to some Department of Interior. So this is a standardized thing we've done in the past. They are looking for $50,000. There might be an ability to not even use that, but they want it that, like how the
Who
courts.
does that? Like, is it a third-party entity?
They would hire.
Who's they?
Probably us, the city, but also it would be under supervision with the SHPO.
Who's done it in the past?
We've hired folks. Yeah.
Who was the
I
that
think
got
it was
hired?
a woman named Mela Harmon, who used to live
Mela
here.
Harmon
There's
used
like
to work
5 or
at
6
SHPO.
people around there.
Okay.
I like we could sole source professional services, and I don't even know if there's anyone local. It's a very regimented, it's almost like doing a NEPA document.
Okay, I
Yeah,
just didn't fully
okay.
understand what the process was.
And so it's 50,000 for that, and then 50,000, I do believe Ms. Stewar's right, for the technical expertise to deal with all of our
day-to-day.
historical staffing. Although I
I
will
just
say.
wasn't fully understand. Thank you
Yeah,
for.
yeah, they've had a lot of churn of staffing, but the two staffers who are assigned right now, Megan Berner, who's our arts and culture manager, knows how to staff boards and commissions, and then they have a new person from CD who hopefully, if that person doesn't get diverted, is also doing a good job too. So, but I do think we need, particularly as we move on with 501 West First Street, we need a little more expertise at the table. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Madam Mayor, did you have any closing comments before we move on? I can't see the.
No,
Okay,
I'm fine. Thanks.
thank you. Okay, back to you.
Thank you. That's all I had. I just wanted to say a quick thank you to you all for joining me for this series. I know that 3 days were really long, and I really appreciate all the questions and you being prepared and paying attention to our budget as it's so important to us. So I really want to thank you, the council members, for that. I want to thank my staff for the help that they gave me in the departments as well. And I also wanted to thank the city manager's office for leading us in this direction and really taking us in the direction to do this and prioritize the way we have.
Fantastic. I think you've done a wonderful job. Great job.
Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, do we have any?
If there's anyone on Zoom who would like to sign in for public comment, please raise your hands. We do not have any in chambers, and we do not have any written public comment, and it does not appear that anyone would like to speak online.
Okay, at this time, looking for a motion to adjourn.
Oh, wait, I thought we were going to go over the supplemental materials. If we could just have 5 minutes on the supplemental materials. You've given us the whole budget that you sent down to the state.
Yes,
Yeah.
I did.
And the org chart, I really do like a lot. I wonder if for the 18th, if you could, for each new add-on, just show what fund it came out of.
Of course.
That would be very helpful. And those are the supplemental materials. So on the 18th, what will we get?
On the 18th, you will get the final document that we'll be submitting to the state. If there are changes at that time, we would have to make those changes and then submit it back to you for signature, but we wouldn't come back to you. You would approve it with, if you're going to approve it in whole, we would do that, or you could approve it with
Contingent on the
these
changes
changes,
at the body.
and then I would make those and bring it back.
And you'll look for 4 people to sign. I remember the last couple of years, it was
Correct.
kind of hard to get folks.
Correct. We have to have a majority vote, and then those, we have to have at least 4 of those that voted
Majority
to
sign, okay.
Correct.
Last question I have, and I meant to bring this up earlier. It appears that you're sending the RDA budgets down separately. I think a couple budget cycles ago, they were rolled up as one budget. Or am I thinking about the CAFR you've rolled up in?
The ACFR, they're rolled up together, yes.
So it is
But they are
one-
separate budgets as far as the budget process, yes, because they're separate entities.
So we sign separately, and they
Correct.
are.
And
And
they have to
separate
vote
votes, separate
separately,
votes. Okay,
yes.
gotcha. Thank you. I don't have anything else. I know the chair called for a motion to adjourn. I'd like to just make a motion that we give direction of $100,000 to be carved out for Historic Resources Commission.
I don't
or
think we're taking
services,
any
that
motions
function.
on any of the other items.
Well, it says
He's taking
possible
in all
direction.
the-
It says possible. Wait a second.
If you'd like to make a motion, you can make a motion. We're not making motions on any individual. We're just taking the collective feedback, and it will come to us on the 18th, as I understood.
Saying.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
there's lots
Figure
of
it out.
things we didn't take
Well-
motions on, but we made comment on.
I think we are within our right to make a motion of direction.
You're free to make a motion
Okay,
if you'd
and
like.
if I don't get a second, I don't get a vote. I just want to clarify that I would like to do that, because I've left the table too many times with, well, I said that. So I do want to make a motion. If I don't get a second, I don't get a vote, that's fine. If it doesn't come back, that's fine. I would like to make a motion that direction is given to provide $100,000 into and it can come from moving within that function, the Arts, Parks, and Historical Resources, for $50,000 for an architectural survey and $50,000 for technical assistance for that functional area.
Yeah, I'll definitely second it.
Okay, discussion?
Madam Vice Mayor, I'm not going to support the motion in part because I'm not familiar enough with all the inner workings of it. I mean, Ms. Breckus, understandably, because she is in the Historic Resources Commission liaison role, has a much greater handle on it. But when I'm making decisions about the budget, I'm not necessarily going to be line iteming any particular items in or out. And B, if it's $100,000 and I'm being, asked to put that to, fire resources or public safety resources, when you add something one place, you're cutting something elsewhere. And so I'm not sure that I see a place where that can happen. And certainly, if Ms. Breckus wanted me to be more aware of it, she would have shared that with me and has not. So I can't support the motion.
Thank you very much. And we do have council donation funds. I mean, those are always a backup if someone feels so strongly and it doesn't come on the 18th. Those are always opportunities. Councilwoman Dorr.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask my colleague, I understand your position, but I didn't specifically speak to you either, but I have spoken in public about this issue during budget seasons and out of budget seasons, and to our manager, and to our planning department for many years. And so I guess what I'm going to ask you is, even if you don't support the motion, do you support the concept? And we leave it to the manager, and if he can make it work, he makes it work. I mean, your lack of support of the motion doesn't mean you don't support the concept, I guess.
Well, I support historic resources
Right.
and their
That's what I wanted to
preservation.
get, yeah.
But whether this is the right vehicle to accomplish that goal. The other thing is it's sort of feels like campaigning from the dais, and I don't believe that that's appropriate. Meaning, some give back or budgetary allocation for a pet project. I haven't come forward and identified a pet project of mine where I want to be able to say, I alone have done this for this community. So it's just concerning to me, the timing of it.
Okay, well, I want to just say, this is not a pet project. This is a function of the city.
I'm not speaking to you, though.
Oh, got you. That isn't being fulfilled. That's the identification here is, it's not a special project, and that's why personally I can't fund it out of my council funds. I don't have $100,000 in council funds, or even 50.
So let's do this. We're gonna get back on track. We have a motion and a second. Councilwoman Weber, do you have discussion on the motion?
I am not going to support the motion, and I think the same thing is that this is, in my mind, any one of us could be sitting here saying the same thing. We need this, we need this, we need this. And you've mentioned it, and we're going to leave it to, I believe we're going to leave it with our manager and the staff to see what they can come up with. So I'm not going to support the motion.
I too am not going to support it. I think it's procedurally inappropriate to do so at this time. Doesn't mean I don't support it 100%. Just I think this isn't the correct way in which to perform theater to try to extract something for some reason I don't fully appreciate. So we got a motion, a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No. Mr. Clerk, please do a roll call vote.
Certainly. Jenny Breckus.
Aye.
Naomi Dewar.
Aye.
Oscar Delgado. Bonnie Weber. Neoma Jordan.
No.
Devin Reese. I have it as 2 ayes and 4 nays.
Okay.
Madam
Motion fails.
And I'm here.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
apologize, Madam Mayor.
Can I just quick discussion on this really quick? A couple things. First of all, I think when you're campaigning that your funds are frozen, correct? I think maybe Mr. Manager. So that is one thing. So, I don't know about that, but I just wanted to bring that up because someone mentioned using council donations, and you can't do that at this time. The other thing I would say is, I think all of us support historical resources, and I'm a big believer in historical, history for tourism and other things, related. I think it's really important to our past and our future, and I think the whole council sees that. But the one thing I would say is, I don't really understand what she's talking about, in the sense it was like, sort of thrown out there. It seemed like it was just sort of piecemealed together. And usually when we're going to do something like that, we put together a presentation. So if this does come back via the manager, just kind of clarity on what this is and who does it. And I thought Councilwoman Jordan asked some good questions, because I was really trying to listen. So a little bit better understanding of what it is, because it seemed to me really, really unclear. And I do think the council wants to get there and be supportive. And I think, collectively, we all want to be there. But I'm going to be honest too, Councilwoman Breckus, it would also help too if we had some support from you on other things as well, so we can move this city forward together and make it work together. Because we do want to be able to support it. But I also think that it probably needs to be a little bit more clarified and a little bit of a presentation, so we understand what it is we are trying to support. So at this time, I'm going to say no, but I'm going to leave it up to the city manager. And if it does come back, I would love to see something a little bit more comprehensive, so we do understand what we're supporting, because I think we all want to get there and we all want to work with you.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, you have recorded the votes. Motion fails. So I believe that is all we have at this time. And Mr. Clerk, we still don't have any public comment?
Madam Vice Mayor. Yeah, thank you. I totally respect where the council's coming from. And I just want to say to the manager, I guess, I like to say it in the public, that it's just an area that needs to be addressed. And Ms. Breckus had a specific project that the Historic Resources Commission has asked for to be done. We've already done several. They're saying this is the next one. So perhaps there's a way to find a place for that. And number two is what I've recommended is not a position, but consulting services that would be on board for the whole city's use. So if you can find a way to figure that out, that'd be great. And I'm happy to talk to you offline about what that might look like. So thank you.
Okay,
And
fantastic.
also-
Councilwoman Weber, did you have anything? No?
And if I could,
Closing, at this point, we don't have any more further public comment?
I'll make a public comment. Just along that line is,
Please fill out a public comment card.
I will.
We're totally out of procedure
the
right
HRC did prepare a strategic plan, and perhaps, briefings could be conducted with each member of the body who is inclined to do so to go over what those priorities are.
now. Fantastic. Same is offered with anybody at RTC. Welcome to come and learn all that we're doing there. Okay, motion to adjourn. Motion a second. All those in favor say aye.
Madam Vice Mayor, we did skip over item C, which is the second general public comment, and I do not have any public comment registered for that item.
Thank you. I thought we had already covered that, but okay. All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, bye.